Story 1. My job is being an engineer. The goal of our department is summarized as figuring out technology to make fun products 10 years in the future. They call it the moonshot. Just last month, we were given a demo of a headband that used electrical shocks, known as vestibular stimulation, to trick me into thinking that I was actually rolling with a virtual reality flight simulator airplane. It actually works. My hobbies involve wildlife photography and astrophotography. I build my own telescopes and gear and have one patent on bird photography. I also do combat robotics, build small battle bots, and fight them a couple of times a year. I design my own electronics, write my own firmware, contribute to remote control-related open-source projects, and write and film tutorials for other robot builders. Story 2. I worked as a chef. I am also a musician and producer. However, my real passion is writing short stories for fun. Story 3. I try to leave creative, thoughtful pranks for my kids and my partner. It makes life more fun. There is a realtor in my town on all the billboards, and she is creepy. I cut out her face from newspapers and hide it around the house and in the lunches periodically. Also, I am not sure if it counts, but I love writing postcards to people I care about. I get them from thrift stores for very cheap, have a glass of wine, and try to remember an amazing memory of someone. I write as eloquently as I can using imagery to bring them back to that moment. Then I mail it off for no reason. Stuff like that. I also love to paint my nails. I would paint them every day if I could. I know acetone is harmful, but I choose to live with that risk. Story 4. In all honesty, lately I have been designing items in Animal Crossing. I have been wanting to learn to drum and figure out how to understand songs I have never heard before to get a head start when I get my drum kit. I also enjoy building online communities, although I am not sure if this counts as creative. Story 5. Corporate jobs kill creativity. Does anyone else feel the 9-to-5 grind stifles your creative potential? Story 6. I wrote a series of articles on creativity. One of my points, and one thing I learned in college, is to provide time and space to be creative. Have a set spot and a set time. In my case, this was often going to a coffee shop with my laptop at a specific time and writing for a certain number of hours. Sometimes I did not even have a subject until I got there. Story 7. Cracking words and laughing at the stupid explanations that are the current status quo. The latest one is dungeon. Online, there was some nonsense about it being an old translation of another possible word. Nope. Pull the word apart. Dung plus ian. A place of immeasurable amounts of waste. Historically, it makes sense. How often did you hear about dungeons having plumbing? I imagine having even a bucket to put fresh bathroom waste in was a luxury for people staying in a good place. Also, I dislike it when people push these false word explanations. I enjoy cracking words, but it frustrates me when I come across people just spouting nonsense. I am working on my anger too. I have problems. Story 8. I enjoy photography, capturing spontaneous moments. Story 9. Entertaining my vivid imagination. Writing stories and poems mainly. Story 10. I make miniatures. I have an entire medieval village with over 30 buildings, a forest, a dungeon, and much more. I started it in 2019 and am still working on it. Story 11. Three-dimensional printing and computer-aided design, woodworking. Both are currently at the level of being better at buying tools than building things. Story 12. I try new hobbies, change routines, and seek fresh experiences. Story 13. Mario Maker levels. Really silly ones. One time I made a level that was entirely thwomps, and you had to navigate it with the car. Story 14. Tabletop role-playing games. Even if we do not have as much time to meet up as a group, I still spend time thinking and writing about new campaigns and characters. Story 15. I paint miniatures, mostly Warhammer 40,000. I love that it requires my full concentration, so I don't have room to be stressed about anything while doing it. Story 16. I like miniature painting and crafting. I am thinking about getting into writing short stories and drawing or painting. Story 17. I am a data engineer, so my work is normally to get data from point A to point B, doing specific tasks along the way. I do not care how it is done. which gives me a lot of freedom and opportunity to find cool and better ways to complete my work each time. It is like a little puzzle to solve, as all requirements are different. This keeps me engaged. Story 18, photography. I have a fancy camera, but modern smartphones are just about on par with it in image fidelity. While that is somewhat disappointing, it also allows me to take shots almost anywhere and anytime the mood strikes. Story 19. As unfortunate as it sounds, during an addiction meeting I attended today, I found solace in some coloring. Story 20. I have been running role-playing campaigns for my friends for the past 30 years every Tuesday night, rain or shine. I have literally millions of words in homebrewed adventures, mostly for the various versions of the Star Wars role-playing games. Story 21. Build spreadsheets to organize my life and make projects easier. For example, I help organize sports tournaments by creating spreadsheets that generate a generic schedule using constraints such as the number of teams, courts, time per game, and playoff format. These spreadsheets allow easy score input, calculate standings, and produce standings and a playoff bracket that people can view throughout the day. It may sound boring, but I love it. Story 22. Mostly writing for a blog I will never publish. Writing is a helpful way to organize my thoughts. Photography and photo editing are on the back burner but still kept warm. Story 23. Creative video games for me include building things in games such as Minecraft. The gameplay in The Sims 4 bores me, but I love building in that game. I recently built a castle which I think turned out pretty neat. Story 24. My attention deficit hyperactivity disorder rated brain has several creative outlets on standby that I cycle through practically each week. Lego, gardening, woodworking, and cooking are the main ones. Right now it is cooking. I got a dough roller and have been making my own pasta noodles. The taste difference is enormous and it is super easy too. Story 25. Regular long-distance cycling offers a lot of time to think while riding, especially without music. I have had many moments of realization simply by reflecting during my rides. Story 26. Multiplayer video games. I can sign on at any time and be whoever I want to. I can be the person who thinks they are funny, the drunk, the fool, the meme, the tryhard, or just play casually and listen to music. Story 27. I bake and create new recipes, make candy and fudge, sing and make music, and grow a garden. Story 28. Lego. If you are totally new to it, I recommend picking up a bulk purchase on one of the resale markets. Then set small challenges for yourself to make different items or concepts, which will force you to use the pieces in new ways. I think it is the best hobby out there, and although I have been building my whole life, really digging into it as an adult has been an extremely rewarding experience. I do not vilify it in the slightest, but if your aim is creativity, then I caution against collecting and displaying the sets. In my opinion, this is how the hobby can get really expensive. Stick to large bulk purchases and sort the collection by piece type. There are lots of resources to explore and rabbit holes to fall down. Happy building. Story 29. Mostly paint. But I love walking and talking to myself. There is a part of my personality that needs to be walked and talked to. If I do not do that, then I feel off. My brain will think and say things I would not expect to say or think if I let it do its thing while going for a stroll. Sometimes I just walk around in circles in the garage if I do not have the space or if it is too hot. Big fan of the walk and talk. Story 30. Learning new skills such as cooking or photography stimulates innovative thinking. Story 31. Lots of tabletop role-playing games and creative writing. I spend at least an hour per day being creative. Story 32. I read a lot, especially about creativity. When I get the urge to create something, I edit images in Photoshop and print custom designs on coffee mugs featuring content from TV shows, anime, games, or whatever else I want. I'm not an artist and do not draw from scratch. I am a Photoshop enthusiast at best, taking images I find online and adjusting them. Sometimes the process is quick and takes about an hour. Other times, the images are missing elements, and I must edit, clean, or redraw extensively, which can take 2 evenings. The only issue is that I am running out of space. I have a cup hanger rack on the wall. Story 33. Thinking of new reasons my boss is going to fire me or why my friends do not like me anymore. keeps the mind young. Story 34. Free writing can be fun. It is simply writing without correcting anything you put down. You are not trying to make something good, but just keeping the flow going even if it does not make sense. Having a prompt so you can practice something specific can be good too. You can even take a picture and try to make a story for it. Story 35. By experimenting with new things, getting out of your comfort zone, embracing your mistakes, and reflecting on them. Practicing mindfulness, such as meditation. Unplugging yourself from digital stimuli, and interacting with nature by letting your mind wander. These are some things that might be helpful. Story 36. The past couple of years, I have been putting together cool outfits on the weekends and posting them to the men's fashion subreddit. It almost feels like a form of journaling. I do not even mind all the teenagers calling me gay. Story 37. Full-time writer, so it is mostly that. Aside from the paid work, I do a weekly newsletter with a brand new free short story every Wednesday, mostly horror and science fiction. That keeps me on my toes. Story 38. I write. It is an outlet I have used since my childhood. I write free verse poetry mostly, but strangely I struggle when I am in a good mental health space. In those times, I pick up one of the novels I have started and shelved, or sometimes I sketch or paint, though I am really not talented in that particular area. Story 39. Music. I have been playing guitar and bass for nearly 20 years. I am still learning and often unsure of what I am doing, but I enjoy experimenting. I also like to customize the instruments. I have painted, stained, installed new pickups, changed pickguards, and done various other modifications to make them uniquely mine. Story 40. I've been writing and recording songs. I am thinking about starting a YouTube channel as well. Story 41. Daily journal, dream journal, story writing, and commenting here. Story 42. Programming games, applications, and websites, as well as creating 3D art and animation. Also, karaoke. Story 43. I talk casually with friends, and we create stories and skits together. I enjoy working in Blender to create 3D environments and characters. I also use Marvelous Designer for digital fashion. Additionally, I use Photoshop and Procreate for image manipulation and digital painting and design. I am a big fan of Adobe After Effects for visual effects and motion graphics. I also like using Adobe InDesign and Adobe Illustrator for graphic design and vector graphics. Finally, I enjoy cooking as it is a great opportunity to try new things. Story 44. Dungeons and Dragons as a living. Creativity always on. 6 different stories and worlds a week. Story 45. Dungeons and Dragons. I am in a couple of different groups, and I am a dungeon master often. I build worlds, make characters, invent plots, and design monsters. I do not know where I would be without it. It is the greatest game to have ever existed and always will be. Story 46. I draw, carve, woodburn. Am relearning to play instruments, crochet, and create impromptu giant chalk art outside late at night. Story 47. I express creativity through cooking, writing, and photography. Even small activities like rearranging a room or trying a new hobby keep it alive for me. Story 48. By imagining watching Optimus Prime fight Megatron. Story 49. I narrate my life in my head. Every minor situation that is somewhat memorable goes into my mental folder of writing prompts and scenes to develop into a story. I also doodle all the time. Random shapes, characters from my stories, and objects around me. Story 50. Cracked copy of Adobe Photoshop and pictures of my friends' pets. Story 51. Juggling. Once you get comfortable with a decent array of tricks, you can flow between them, creating new sub-tricks. It is a great way to access intuitive creativity on the fly and enter a flow state. Story 52. I run a Dungeons and Dragons game for my friends. It involves improvisation, a lot of preparation, creative writing, clever tactical wargaming, and even requires some basic coding to get the custom features working on our online virtual tabletop. Story 53. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. It is a lot of fun. Story 54. I write books, photograph nature, and play Dungeons and Dragons with my children. Story 55. I like going to outdoor coffee shops, places where you can be seated and see lots of people passing by. I usually take my notebook and start writing about the people who pass by, trying to imagine who they are and what they do. I try not to go to the most obvious take to make it more interesting and choose more far-fetched professions or reasons why a person is smiling, angry, or tired looking. Story 56. I went to work because it is the only thing elderly people think I should do because I am lazy. Story 57. Cooking, exploring new recipes and techniques, writing music, playing multiple instruments, recording and producing music, making videos, building avatars, designing and building three-dimensional spaces, producing virtual events, training martial arts, building and designing websites, building communities. There is usually something going on. Story 58. I scroll through Reddit and other sites like Atlas Obscura. I look at interesting posts and try to come up with creative ideas for paintings, illustrations, and funny t-shirts. Approximately 250 so far. Unfortunately, I lack artistic talent, but I am exploring generative artificial intelligence. I also have about 5 to 10 super creative video game ideas, and fortunately, I can code. However, I don't know what makes good gameplay, even though I spent most of my childhood playing games. Occasionally, I get unique premises for stories. It is a shame that I never read much, my grammar is poor, and I have little understanding of human character. What I actually do is carry a budget digital camera and take random photos. I should probably move into photography, but it is an expensive hobby, and I am frugal. So, I am very imaginative, but I do nothing about it. And thank goodness I lack any talent for music. Story 59. I do three-dimensional modeling and three-dimensional printing. It is a good outlet for satisfying the creative urge, and you get a great sense of achievement when the finished product actually works. Story 60. Bonsai trees, my aquarium, three-dimensional printing, building vacuum tube amplifiers. Story 61. As a male, I practice my video games while my girlfriend yells at me. Story 62. Elaborate revenge fantasies about people who do not signal when they change lanes on the freeway. Story 63. Ask an adult with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I jump from project to project, never finishing any of them but being decent at most. Story 64. I think of something I need or want. I consider how to make it and then design a blueprint on paper, including dimensions and other details. Then I build it using wood, metal, glass, or a combination of these materials, adding any electrical or lighting components as needed. My idea becomes reality. Easy. Story 65. Creative writing. I like to start with a narrow subject like imagining the perfect bedroom. It makes it easier to beat the blank page. When ideas start coming in, it actually gets harder to not drift too far off point. Story 66. Thinking. Looking for patterns in everything to understand the big picture. I am not a person you can just tell something to. You have to explain and talk to me about it. This means I learn to improve and grow. Then I pass that gift on to others, or at least try to. I have learned I have to limit myself. Compassion fatigue is a real thing. Story 67. Every morning I try to imagine a new reason to get out of bed. Story 68. I always wanted to do something with music, but I have neither the attention span nor the time or ability to really learn an instrument. So I picked up disc jockeying for fun. I do not produce my own tracks or anything special. I just like to find a bunch of songs I am enjoying at any point in time and mix them together. Story 69. I do a trashy movie review show on YouTube. I've always liked theater, trashy movies, and late-night horror hosts like Elvira, Joe Bob Briggs, Rhonda Shear, and Gilbert Gottfried. I write, perform, record, and edit my episodes. I'm learning a lot just by doing it. The show gets better all the time with slow and steady growth. I will probably never get famous, but I am having a lot of fun doing it. Story 70. I delve into other people's creativity more than my own nowadays. I read, I build Lego following instructions, and I encourage my son to play imaginary games or to color or paint. I am too exhausted to do anything creative myself. Story 71. I am really lucky I had the time and energy to become a pretty good artist. Now I do it full-time at a concept art studio. I create my own paintings on the side, mostly science fiction, horror, and light fantasy. Story 72, Dungeons and Dragons. Even if you never really play the actual game, it is fun to build adventures and characters. They also tend to develop quickly, which feels good. I have recently started creating a 3-second movie clip each day and condense them into a longer clip at the end of the month. It makes you think about good shots and perspectives, really considering how you view things. It is a cool, low-effort way to keep a visual diary too. Story 73, Be bored. Try some creative activity. Fail miserably because of lack of practice. Repeat step 1. Story 74, Looking at abstract art or the people and things around me. No one looks alike, and no tree has the same number of leaves. I also enjoy learning odd facts, regardless of the category. Story 75. A couple of years ago, I downloaded an app called the Creative Whack Pack. It is basically a deck of cards you shuffle through. Most of them are proverbs with extended explanations, thought experiments, or short stories. This really helped me embrace problems and situations with different perspectives, and forced me to look outside the box. It even had a tarot-like function where you could create a card deck, name it after an idea or problem you are currently facing, and it would provide a fixed number of cards to help you overcome a creative block. This tool significantly helped me with my creative process. Story 76. Mostly with my home decoration. Not sure what I will do once I am out of rooms that need decorating. Story 77. I make action figure videos and play the piano, mostly jazz. It is always satisfying when you see or hear what originally was just in your mind. Story 78. Writing my second fantasy book this year. I get to exercise my creativity every day. Story 79. It's my job. I observe broadly, keep up to date with information, and constantly think about how to make things better and why things are the way they are. The threading of that needle helps me create things that are sufficiently innovative but also sufficiently familiar for the market. Story 80, 35 years here. Drawing, video editing, baking, and cooking. It really does not have to be anything fancy, as long as you are exercising your mind. I think this is a key thing to avoid growing old too fast. Story 81. I have a few people I workshop stand-up bits and sketches with. It has been years since we have shown anything as a group, and I still perform at the occasional open mic. I like keeping my writing, joke-making, and public speaking skills sharp because I am often asked to speak at many weddings. Story 82. My favorite thing to do is to take a fight scene or a chase scene from a film or show and see how that would work as a Dungeons and Dragons scenario. That usually gets the creative juices flowing, and I start working on my own story and why the characters are there. I have created some short stories and more from this process. Story 83. I'm learning game development in Godot. I find myself thinking about it while I'm at work, saying, ooh, I've got to implement that. And of course, that's how I can get that done. Story 84. I write short essays and stories about the things that I see or have experienced. Story 85. I write novels and humorous travelogues about my trips during my commute. Story 86. Flower garden, home decor, do-it-yourself jury rigging, and digital art. Story 87. I'm a novelist, and I make chainmail art and jewelry. I have a few other hobbies, but those are the two main creative ones. For fun, I like to get random craft kits and try different crafts, such as needle felting, polymer clay, macrame, and whittling. Story 88. Tabletop role-playing games and building or playing my characters in video games. Story 89. Book writing and creating my own online communities to teach history. Story 90. I started painting miniatures during coronavirus disease 2019. There is something nice about investing many hours into a tiny model and seeing incremental progress on it. It is very cathartic. Story 91. Building neat bases in video games is awesome and fun, but it is sad that no one truly recognizes the artistic creativity involved. Story 92. Writing science fiction at the moment. I also used to draw and write music, but not as much now. Story 93. Guitar. Experimenting with digital audio workstations until my head hurts. Blogging. Pretty much it. Story 94. I play the piano and write songs for myself, my family, and friends to enjoy. I also write stories sporadically. Story 95. I create fictional sports leagues with each team having a team name, logo, home and away uniforms, team lettermark, and a team-colored scarf wrapped around the logo. One league had 24 teams. Another had two parts, one with 20 teams and the other with 22 teams. Each team's elements fit on an A4 page, so it fits into a display folder and looks like an information booklet or season guide for that league. All of this is done in colored pen and pencil. Story 96. I used to write comedy skits, but I never had the courage to act them out. I was going to start doing it on TikTok, but I never got around to it. Story 97. I paint miniatures and participate in 2 Pathfinder campaigns. Keeps the mind busy and the soul full. Story 98. 3D modeling and sculpting, just little doodles sometimes. Story 99. Through hobbies like painting, writing, or cooking, and in everyday tasks like problem solving at work, decorating, or gardening. Even daydreaming or finding new ways to entertain can keep the creative spark alive. Story 100. I'm surprised how the top answer is not the obvious one. Gaming. I looked through 20 to 30 responses, and not one mentioned gaming. Do people not consider that an expression of creativity? Factorio, RimWorld, Satisfactory, they are all significant outlets for my creativity. Story 101. I ask my wife to give me writing prompts. I write fantasy, draw that fantasy, share it with my friends, and incorporate my ideas into Dungeons and Dragons when I get the chance. I have been creating a campaign with a full narrative and cohesive story for my friends to play, though they probably never will. I enjoy writing whenever I feel inspired. I express myself creatively in video games, especially those with dress-up features, such as World of Warcraft and Star Wars: The Old Republic. I draw and sell commission art, or I used to when I did tattoos. I enjoy drawing with Sharpies, painting, or whatever medium it is. I love being creative and silly. I also do projects with my kids. Art supplies are inexpensive. For example, we make spider popsicle sticks with yarn for webs. My son and I write love letters to my wife about once a month. We sit down and get creative together. Story 102. I started a podcast with an old school friend of mine. It has been great for bonding again and learning something new creatively. Story 103. Shooting range. Guns are art, and everything about the process is therapeutic to me. Even cleaning them, you get to see how they are designed and the unique ways each model and manufacturer were engineered. Story 104. Hate my life for a few days. Retreat inward. Try then fail. Story 105. My dreams are very inspiring, but I can't help but wonder what they are trying to tell me because they have been very vivid. I'm a writer and I used to write lyrics. Sometimes I still do, but my dream is to write a book one day. It's just a matter of dedicating myself to it. It's even harder since I've been so depressed after my separation from my husband. Even after all the difficult experiences, I miss him. Trauma bonds a person for life. Trauma can also be a source of creative inspiration if the depression and loneliness do not cause you to lose that creative drive. Story 106. I am a Dungeons and Dragons dungeon master. I have created a homebrew game with nations, cities, non-player characters, 300 unique names, and personal quests for all my players, as well as the overarching storyline. Story 107. I am a woodworker, 3-dimensional print designer, and I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. Story 108. I read and make notes on different socio-political scenarios happening in my country and how they can affect the economy. I analyze the data from various viewpoints and gain a clear understanding of by whom and why it can be predicted or misrepresented. I prepare reports on the same and keep them with me so the next time I read the newspaper, I know the author's exact profile. I perform reverse profiling. Story 109. Making deaths of unauthorized immigrants appear natural or accidental. Story 110. I do not have any, so adulthood is a huge relief for me. I dislike that our society is structured in a way that it takes so long to move beyond the life stage where you are constantly expected to be creative. Story 111. tabletop role-playing games and settings that could easily become various forms of media, but focus is an issue. Story 112. When I go through difficult experiences, good or bad, I write them down like lyrics and then keep them on a shelf, never reading them again. It is kind of like Albus Dumbledore with the pensive. Story 113. Kit bashing and painting Warhammer models mainly. I have been dabbling with the hobby for about 25 years, and my pride and joy is an army of mercenary ogres where every single model is representing a different faction. It does not win many tournaments, but my opponents enjoy playing Find the Guy representing my army. Story 114. I write fiction, mostly sad science fiction and unusual modern fantasy. Story 115. Painting miniatures, reading science fiction, modeling and sculpting in three-dimensional software, then printing it out and painting it, cooking. To a lesser extent, interior design. We have only lived in our home for a year, so things still need to develop a bit. Plenty of plans and schemes to make the home feel more like one. Story 116. I edit videos for work, which lets me use a little creativity, but it is still a job, so I have to make what clients want. Outside of that, I am really into tabletop role-playing games, mostly Dungeons and Dragons. I create the story for the campaigns I run. I three-dimensional print minifigures that my wife and I paint together for our games, and sometimes I make physical terrain. We had a big fight with pirates on a ship, so I three-dimensional printed a large ship that the players used as the map for that fight. A lot of the creative things I work on now somehow tie back to Dungeons and Dragons, since there are many things you can make to add a little more immersion to the game. Story 117. Play guitar, bass, piano, and drums. Write songs, including both the music and lyrics. Story 118. Sometimes I get a sudden urge of creativity. That is when I draw intensely for 1 to 4 hours, and then I leave it behind again until the urge returns. It often takes a few months before it reoccurs. I also have small bursts of creativity through journaling, mind mapping, building houses in The Sims, or decorating my home. However, these activities do not come close to the intensity of those intense creative episodes. Story 119. Brainstorming ideas for a fantasy story. I am planning my music around it. Story 120. A friend introduced me to Ironsworn. Starforged to scratch that itch. It's a tabletop role-playing game that focuses more on creating tension and interesting story moments. Think Dungeons and Dragons, but less about math and more about fueling your creativity to craft a story. There are no set adventures or universes in the base game, just a large number of random idea tables and your imagination within a light game framework to encourage generating conflict and storylines. It is geared towards solo play, where you are both the game master and the player, or a small group to create collaboratively. Story 121. I play acoustic music with friends. We perform about 3 shows a month on weekends, usually at breweries or wineries in the afternoon or late evenings. We write many of our own songs and also play covers. Whenever I hear or read something that grabs my attention, I jot down some notes. Sometimes I think of a melody and hum or sing it into my phone. If I have the chance, I will put it together myself, or I will share it with my bandmate who is a better songwriter than I am as an idea. Usually, he comes back with a completed song within a few days or a week. Then we perform it live and see what happens. Story 122. Building castles in The Sims 4, coloring with gel pens in adult coloring books, acrylic painting, experimenting with graphics and colors on different applications like Canva, playing with Barbies with my children. Story 123. I work as a graphic designer, so being creative is my job. It is the kind of job that does not really stop. I get creative ideas at the most random and inconvenient times, but I try to do the opposite when I am not working by switching off my creativity. Story 124. I used to write poetry, but now I use my creativity to design cozy, happy places in my home. Story 125. As someone who is a professional artist, I tend to practice the opposite. I read, play Age of Empires, and visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Story 126. I write fan fiction and then never let anyone know it exists. Story 127. Being the dungeon master for Dungeons and Dragons, I used to be a member of Toastmasters as well, which was a different kind of creative outlet but was quite enjoyable. Story 128. I make ice cream. It is a surprisingly rewarding creative medium. Story 129. I write AskReddit answers that contain an unexpected haberdashery. Story 130. Creating fanfiction ideas in my head that I know will never actually be made by me. Story 131. Doodling throughout my workday, but since I am on medication for anxiety and depression, I feel like all my creativity is just doodles. Story 132. I daydream, but I also write poetry for people's birthdays. I wrote one for a colleague's wedding. Story 133. I have extreme hyperphantasia, which gives endless creativity. Sometimes it is helpful, but honestly, it is very exhausting and annoying. Story 134. Left-hand journaling. Image streaming instead of scrolling my phone. This time, it is obviously not the case. Story 135. This is a very specific interest for me personally. I pick up some of my old college mathematics textbooks, and there are some free ones online that I download. These cover mathematics at the level of late undergraduate, early graduate, and higher. Proving any of the exercises requires a lot of creative problem solving, similar to a complicated puzzle game. If you do not have the background in it, I would not suggest it. But if you do, it is very engaging. Story 136. Cooking. My job as a software developer also requires a fair amount of creativity. Story 137. Started making my own ice cream. Needless to say, my neighbors really like me now since I cannot eat it all myself. Story 138. Usually through sports, disc golf, and to a lesser extent, hockey. There is no set way you have to play, and there is lots of room for creativity. I use a lot of my brain power at work, so I am not usually properly motivated for the arts in my spare time. Story 139. Having a childlike sense of wonder and being able to shut off the more critical parts of my thinking when I occupy that space is important. Part of it is always being in touch with that, and the other part is actively forgetting a lot of reasons so that I can access it when I need to. While there, it is just sharpening the ability to perceive things as though they are fresh to me, as if I still have a question about something. I can find footholds for creativity through that process. Story 140. Come up with exciting ideas for games, videos, or drawings that I would like to see exist in the world, and then prevent my executive dysfunction and low energy from ever realizing them, and play 8 hours of Euro Truck Simulator 2. Story 141. I review movies and make high-quality YouTube videos. Story 142. I spend most of my day making things: additive manufacturing, subtractive manufacturing, ceramics, whatever works to bring ideas into being. I was also lucky that my career was rooted in daily creativity, building products, teams, and companies. The only real change these days is that I do not need to produce anything marketable. Story 143. Any part of your life. Creating music. Playing games like Cities Skylines. Designing logos or outfits for my sports team. Cooking delicious, cool-looking meals. Taking pictures of my surroundings. Dressing myself every day and buying new clothes. Buying furniture, decorations, or revamping my living space. Getting a different haircut and playing around with new styles. Even at work, experimenting with creative ways to present results and ideas, or choosing a color scheme and layout for a dashboard as a data scientist. You can find creativity in all parts of your life, hobby, work, or other necessary activities. Just pay a little attention to detail. Go the extra mile, even if it is just an extra inch, to express your unique view in what you do, wear, eat, produce, think, and say. It brings color to your life. Story 144. I take pictures of my feet against the best backdrops I can find. Story 145. I am a dungeon master for various Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing game groups. I do absolutely no preparation work besides non-player characters and basic plot guidelines for me to follow. Everything that happens is entirely off the cuff, and I come up with descriptions, events, enemies, and other relevant information in the moment. It forces me to be nimble and think quickly and creatively. Story 146. I've been known to cry to the tune of 1970s power ballads. It always goes down well at the bus stop. Story 147. I write a lot. I've been writing since I was a kid. Throughout high school, I published my own newsletter and zine. I wrote comics and short stories, including an embarrassing amount of Pokemon fanfiction that developed a substantial cult following, but that is another story. In college, I tried my hand at screenplays and more in-depth stories geared toward an older audience. In 2019, I published my first book, Life, Death and Atom, a comedy drama. It did okay in sales. Over the last few years, I've been developing screenplays, writing short stories and poems, that sort of thing. Right now, I'm wrapping up my next book. Hopefully, I'll have it released before the year is over. I am constantly brainstorming ideas and developing stories as things happen to me throughout my life. Looking at things through a lens and thinking, is there a story worth telling here? For clarification, the author profile listed on Amazon with my name is not me. I don't know why they did that. Story 148. I help friends start businesses and overcome their fear of trying something on their own. I love doing it on an emotional level and have become a partner in several amazing businesses. Story 149. I started painting Dungeons and Dragons miniatures and now I am addicted. Every Friday after work, I go to the hobby shop and buy another figure to paint for the week. Story 150. My words and ideas flow when I am hiking in beautiful places. Story 151. My dad designs and three-dimensional prints whatever random items come to mind. Our house is covered in printed decorations and tools that are actually quite useful. We now have 2 rooms devoted to a family three-dimensional printing business. It is kind of fun to watch what creative things he comes up with. Story 152. Oh, I cannot do that. It broke one day. I have no idea what happened. I just sit and fume because I cannot seem to get it. Story 153. I write. I have a couple of thousand user subscribers on Archive of Our Own and reliably get over 1,000 kudos on everything I post. So it is quite rewarding. In Archive of Our Own terms, this makes me moderately popular as a writer. No, I am not linking my Archive of Our Own username to my Reddit account. Story 154. I daydream. I like to imagine crazy scenarios and force them to make sense, then decide what I would do if it actually happened. Let's just say if the building across the street from my store ever explodes. I have this. I have a plan. Story 155. I paint or draw. I have realized I can make enough money at it to live on, but finances would be tight. Alternatively, I can simply enjoy being creative. Being outside on my patio during summer, just playing around with painting, is my happy thing. Experimenting with techniques and subjects is better than meditation for boosting my mood. Ironically, this summer I seem to be focused heavily on H.P. Lovecraft. Story 156. Writing in a journal, drawing in my sketchbook, or on my phone. Story 157. I write poor poetry, which my partner loves regardless of its quality. Story 158. Try activities that are new to you, such as painting, writing, cooking, or playing an instrument. Stepping out of your comfort zone can inspire creativity. Story 159. I like to write children's books. I try to address issues that both kids and adults might face. My last book was about burnout. I was fortunate with that one because I was experiencing it at my previous employer. My usual process is to think of one idea, and during every free moment, I develop that idea further in my mind until I have a world, characters, and a potential beginning. This usually takes a few weeks. Then I write and it generally turns out well. Story 160. I try to exercise my creativity by doodling, experimenting with new recipes, writing short stories, editing photos, and learning new skills. It is a constant journey of exploration and self-expression. Story 161. Tabletop gaming in all its many forms, playing a character in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, executing tactics in wargaming, and figuring out how to make the rules work for you in a particular board game, are all activities that exercise the mind in fantastical settings. Also, do not give up your childlike wonder. Story 162. I make sure to write a poem at least once a year, in addition to my other writings throughout the year. You would be surprised how quickly a year passes without maintaining a hobby. So that rule keeps me writing. Story 163, mostly here. Story 164. I work in design and engineering. While there are limits, it still allows me creativity. Story 165. Truthfully, when I am very high and playing video games. Story 166. Classical guitar. I started at age 49. You are never too old to learn something new. Story 167. I run the football tipping competition at work, complete with detailed preview and results emails and ladders from national and local leagues. Story 168. Building and painting Warhammer. Creating scenery from random items around the house is a great outlet for creativity. Story 169. I am a 45-year-old man who makes resin-based products. My main product is mini artificial koi ponds in thrifted bowls, cups, and various other containers. I also write poetry and short horror stories, and I do photography. Story 170. As lame as it sounds, having children not only forces me to be more creative, but it has also really opened up a creative side and talents I never knew existed. Whether painting, drawing, doing crafts, creating new elaborate elf-on-the-shelf mischief, writing songs spontaneously about what we are doing at the moment, or building mini-worlds during playtime, the children have really helped me tap into creativity I had never used before. I am loving every minute of it. Story 171. Crochet, play with Legos, play video games, dye my own hair, do my makeup, cook, bake, read, write, thrift flip, decorate and reorganize my home, play Dungeons and Dragons, color, and draw. Literally any chance I get to exercise my creativity, I will. Story 172. By doing creative things. Basically, I jump from hobby to hobby based on my whims, which is something I have always done except I can afford more things as an adult. Story 173. I knit every day. Lifelong cold feet and idle hands eventually led me to making my own socks, which I find satisfies a creative itch. I also love to read and cook really nice meals on the weekend. Story 174. Being the dungeon master in a Dungeons and Dragons game with my friends. Story 175. I spend 30 minutes a day working on an art project. Daily consistency, coupled with low time demand, minimizes overwhelm, and the routine ensures the project grows little by little. Story 176. Morning Pages is a large, almost stream of consciousness brain dump writing session for 15 minutes every day, usually in the morning. Story 177. I create things. I make modifications for Skyrim, which involves a lot of work. I 3D model, paint textures, use third-party tools to assemble everything, and ensure it all functions properly. Then I use the creation kit to put everything together, which is its own skill set. I also create 3D animations and edit videos. I do these tasks for work, and they take up a lot of time. If I had more free time or didn't have to earn money, I would stop doing animation and video editing and focus on developing my own video game using the skills I've learned through modding over the last decade. I have well over 50 different video game ideas, ranging from small projects to ambitious ones. I believe game development will become much easier in 10 years. It's already quite accessible now. The biggest challenge is asset creation, which is why many low-quality games are asset flips. Anyone can spend $500 to $5,000 buying assets and assemble them in Unreal Engine to create something that looks like a good game. People unfamiliar with asset stores don't realize they are viewing purchase content, so it appears impressive to them. These scammers make $1 million and move on. Once machine learning can create 3D models and textures independently, the market will be flooded with even more poor quality content. If you look at DeviantArt today, 99% of the content is AI-generated garbage. Real artists are being overshadowed. Drawing and painting for a living is becoming futile. Eventually, all art forms will be similarly affected. It will take longer for more advanced fields like animation and movies, but for still art, it's essentially over. For coding and scripting, basic tasks will be automated as well. You'll still need to understand what you're doing in most cases, but mostly you will generate content and tweak it, which is frustrating but inevitable. You cannot stop someone in China from photoshopping images of Taylor Swift eating a bowl of bees, nor prevent them from generating hundreds of similar images with variations using AI. That said, I want to improve my 3D modeling skills and create real-life statues or figurines of characters. I also want to make cartoons similar in tone and concept to anime, but with a high-quality, big-budget Western art style similar to classic Disney 2D animation. Not the same style, but with that level of detail and quality, unlike the simplified animation styles often used by Western artists to save money. Story 178. I write my partner graphic sexually explicit emails, which she welcomes. Story 179. Tinkering with things in my garage that I have learned from YouTube University. Story 180. My electric guitar and loop pedal. I can spend hours on them, and they really take my mind off things. I am an average player but love the feeling of creating my own songs. My Notes app is full of lyrics and poems too, which will probably never see the public eye. Story 181. I create complex Google Sheets to solve the simplest problems. Story 182. Dance. Even if I were not a dance teacher, I would still put on music and bop around. For non-dance related activities, I love embroidery. I have become really interested in designing my own patterns and making them. Story 183. Daydreaming when there is little time. Painting, writing, reading, and drawing when there is a little more time. Story 184. Voice acting as Ghost Rider, also known as Danny, for fun. I enjoy playing guitar and writing random story ideas during my job. Story 185. I started making nail and thread art. I began by staining some reclaimed wood and created a nail art piece of a state where a friend lives, with the string art indicating his location in the state. I made a Pikachu face for my son, who became interested in Pokemon. Story 186. I sing in a choir. I am also a university librarian and create various teaching resources that utilize my creative skills. Story 187. Lots of brainstorming and art appreciation, a bit of writing ideas down, but mostly commissioning art. Story 188. I bought an old house from 1935 that had been well preserved but needed maintenance and updates. I have about 80% of it modeled in 3D using Fusion 360. I have designed every stud, molding, cabinet door, and plumbing for drainage, waste, and vent systems, but not the water lines, although maybe someday. With each new project, I design everything in 3D, and then build it. I may or may not stay in this house forever, but for now, I consider the work I have done and am planning to be my life's work. With each project, I focus on designing it to be timeless and building it to be high quality so that each modification has the best chance of lasting. I enjoy building the projects, but the design part is my creative outlet. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.